So I saw comic books hanging on walls. I dug through back issue bins with my bare hands and bought comics from real people. I know, crazy, right? All right. I have something that I think is going to be a lot of fun. I have a series of clips and stories and books to show you from a comic book convention that I recently attended. Now, this is probably the first convention have attended in, I think, over a year. Uh, as you know, most of my purchases come through online dealers or online auctions, and I very rarely go to an LCS because I just feel like my time is better served being in the comfort of my own home, but also using the tools that I've developed to be able to kind of do my own digital comic book hunting. But I wanted to get out to get a little fresh air and meet some other fellow comic book collectors, look at some other dealers. And the basic premise where I was kind of going into this is it worth my time? Is it worth my money to go to a show or go to anywhere really physically where they're selling comic books and be able to assess the book in my hand, look at the comic, being able to kind of grade it on site? What are the prices? And there was just some very interesting things that I came across, and I'm going to show you the series of clips and kind of talk through them and just kind of describe what was going through my head at the time as I was kind of walking around the show floor. And then what I did end up bringing home, which again is kind of a story in of itself. So the first part will be those clips of the show, so you can kind of see what the show looked like and look at some of the books that were up on the wall. And then I'll kind of talk about again those I think recurring themes, those consistent feelings I had about the dealers and the books and the prices and just the market in general. So I hope you enjoy this, and then stay for the second half where I will show you the books that I ended up picking up and bringing home, because there's definitely some excitement there on my part. And I guess the teaser I have for you is I was not expecting really to come home with anything, and so I'll walk you through again my thought process there. So for the first half, please enjoy these clips of this comic book show that I attended. Hey there, I've got something a little bit different for you today. I'm going to be attending a comic book convention. That's right, in person, in the flesh, like going in and actually talking to dealers and negotiating and looking for books and digging through bins. I'm a little bit out of my element here because I normally do this online. And I'm going to have some fun with it. I'm really looking forward to kind of being in person, looking at books, seeing if there are any books that are undergraded, seeing what kind of deals I can strike, and I'll kind of show you, some highlights of the show, certainly what I picked up, maybe some stories, things that I noticed, things I passed on, trends, and so forth, and then any specific methods that I sort of use to my advantage, I would say, to find books and get good prices and good deals. So let's go inside and take a look at the show. So the first thing you'll notice, it was a gorgeous day. It was a beautiful day outside, and so all the more reason to get out of my comic book cave and head in. So this was at a hotel. This was the San Fernando Valley Comic Book Convention. And as I'm approaching the front door, I don't have as much of a game plan as I would have liked. I would have liked to have had some books that I wanted to target and specifically look for. I mean, I have some books in general that I'm always looking for, and I figured I would go in and take a look, and maybe some books would jump out at me. But I was certainly just there really more for the atmosphere and wanted to kind of soak it all in, and again, just kind of see if the online market is matching what's going on with the in-person market. So I kind of walked in and went ahead and paid my admission and got inside. So this was one of the first tables I stopped at, and definitely spent a lot of time here looking at the wall books and going through all of the bins. And what was great was this particular dealer had all of his books marked in terms of condition and price. And everything was alphabetized. So it made it really easy for me to kind of sift through the bins and look at different things. And I just started to look and see prices were, I think, pretty much along with what you would typically see online. So I wasn't necessarily looking at deals here, but in terms of eBay prices and other sources, the prices were pretty much about the same. But nothing really jumped out at me in terms of, oh, okay, this was a book now I was going to try and focus on or negotiate with. Again, I kind of fall back to what I know or what I've been buying. So I was looking at the Star Wars back issues, and actually was looking at some of the books in the 30s and 40s. Most of these folks, they are savvy dealers, collectors. You are not going to find keys in the bins at high grade. They're all on the wall, they're all picked out. So, for example, as I'm going through the bin and looking at the Star Wars back issues, Star Wars 42 is not there. But 39 was, 40 was, 44 was, and looking at those in terms of price. And then what I would do typically is I would just kind of step away from the booth, and I would pull up my acquisition spreadsheet where I enter all of my values and data, and just to kind of see what the fair market value is. And again, when I would go back and compare, they were more or less the same here. But what a great selection of books. I just loved looking. I mean, part of me being here was just looking at all the books. So this was definitely a booth and a table worth stopping at to look at. Now, as you can see, I started to wander around a little bit, and I just call them doing my laps. So I'm doing my laps around the convention hall. It was just an oversized ballroom. And as I'm kind of making the rounds, I just decide, you know what, I'm just here to kind of look, uh, get it, just see all the cool books that everybody has, and then probably head home. And as I kind of made my laps and I kind of, went clockwise, counterclockwise, and just kind of roamed around, I found some other back issue bins with some older, like $1, $2 books and things like that. But I did start to notice some consistency where there were a certain number of books that were showing up on walls in other bins from table to table. And I started to think, well, now hold on a second. Maybe I can target certain books. Maybe I can start to look at prices. And what started to happen was I was noticing books and I was starting to memorize the conditions, the price, and then I was kind of making these mental notes, deciding, okay, these are books that I'm going to try and target and maybe negotiate with. And I had set aside a budget, and I was not going to go over that budget. I was going to really try hard and stick to only spending the money that I brought at a maximum. And so this is where certain books that I had remembered that I was targeting started to, again, kind of come across my radar. Now, on the opposite corner, I found another dealer and decided to stop and go through some of his back issue bins. He didn't have a huge selection here, but what he did have were books that were pretty much right in line with what I target and what I collect. So I started to just kind of go through his bins and tried to be a little bit, passive, just didn't want to seem overly interested. But some books on his wall caught my eye as well. So I was kind of wandering back, but I'm like, you know what? I need to go back to that particular table and spend some time there and really go in and take a look at what he has in the bins and what he has on the wall. And that's where I really started to focus in on a few key books, and I will explain exactly what those books were and how I went about acquiring or at least inquiring about those specific comics. So basically, what had happened at this point is I noticed some of his wall books as I was digging through the bins. And also, as I was looking through the bins, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing some titles and some books that I am familiar with, I'm comfortable with. Maybe I had already even purchased before. So a handful of books of Uncanny X-Men. I'm looking at Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm looking at the condition of the books in the bin and thinking to myself, okay, these are 9.92, 9.4 at worst. They're in good shape. The general consensus of the show was that the books that were out on the floor that you were able to actually touch without going up to the wall were mid grade. Even the books in sort of the harder plastic, rigid holders, the top loaders and things like that, those sorts of books still were anywhere from 4 or 5 upwards to 9. You just didn't see them out there, and the dealers were good. They marked the books with the grade on them, and obviously, if they're not slabbed, no one's going to put out something that says 9.8. So it makes sense. But this other dealer, he had prices on his books, but not grades. And when I started to look at some of the books in the bin, seeing that they were in high grade, my thought process was, well, I can now look at the wall books and see, because again, they weren't listed with condition. So I inquired about a couple of the books. He handed the book to me. I looked at it. He was talking about how, oh, this one's not, every book I asked for, basically, he was saying how they weren't necessarily a 9.8. They have some sort of condition issue, which I appreciated and respected his honesty. But I wanted to look at them myself as well. And I'm looking at a few of the books. And then he was talking about some of the other books on the wall, and honestly, this is where all of the light bulbs started to go off, and the bells and whistles and so forth, because these were all books that either I wanted to add to my collection, they were in my price range, and then it just became a matter of deciding which books I was going to pick up and which books I was going to have to let go. So I'll tell you a couple of the books that I passed on. The first was New Mutants Annual #2. Now, I have this book, but it is a mid-grade. I want to say it's a fine, very fine copy. It has a little bit of fading in the pink area of the cover, certainly some spine damage as well. I've had that book since I was a young collector, and he happened to have a copy. And I took a look at it, and it definitely had a spine push, that spine roll that you typically see that could come out with a press. So as I'm looking at that book, I'm like, okay, so even though these books have somewhat, condition issues, that maybe they're just pressable defects. So I was looking at that too. But as I examined that book a little more closely, although it was a striking, vibrant pink cover there, and it's an important book, first Psylocke, there were too many color breaks for me to really justify the price, although the price was affordable. So his prices, I think, were more in line with condition instead of just, hey, this is what the market is bearing right now, so go ahead and pay market value. He actually brought his prices more in line with the condition, which I appreciated. So I was thinking to myself, okay, if I were to buy books from him that I could potentially press, then it would be worth my while. But this is really where I transitioned away from, I'm probably going to leave here with nothing, and it was just kind of a fun experience, to I'm going to leave here with some books within my budget. And now it's just a matter of deciding which books. The second book I passed on, I'm having some regrets afterwards, but I think what was important for me is to leave with books that I would be happy adding to my collection, and not with books that I would just only be happy with if I sold. This was X-Men 130, and that is the first appearance of Dazzler. That is a book that has significance in terms of the X-Men lore, but also in terms of a character that is really kind of out there. It is a gorgeous cover, and I know that from doing my research on books available at Mile High Comics, they have this available in a near mint, and it is super expensive. I'm looking at the book and I'm like, I think this is near mint. I think it's a 9.4. I know what the value is in a 9.8, and it's crazy. And I'm looking at it and staring at it going, I think I can press this either myself or certainly a professional presser could look at it and it could be a 9.6. And I start to get excited because I'm thinking there's a lot of value here. I ended up passing. And the reason I passed, the reason I'm having regrets is it probably could have been my biggest score there in terms of potential. But I passed on the book because I was really thinking value. I was thinking flipping and so on. And I decided to walk away from that book. It was a little bit over my budget. Honestly, it would have either been the only book I purchased, or maybe that book and a couple of others, or I would have had to have left the convention, gotten more cash because these dealers are cash only, and come back. And when I was thinking about that, the scenario where I would be leaving to get more cash, I knew at that point this is not the right book for me. So I handed the book back to the dealer, and I knew as I was handing it back, I'm like, I'm probably going to regret that. But I had to focus on books that I wanted to add to my collection. And when I say that, I mean, if I end up selling them, that's fine. But if I don't, I'm happy with them staying. And it's not like I would be unhappy with the first appearance of Dazzler being in my collection. But it would always kind of haunt my thoughts and thinking, I need to sell that book. I need to sell it. Instead of it being a kind of a welcome addition. Believe me, if that book had gotten a 9.6 and I got it professionally graded and slabbed, it'd be up on the wall. So, I understand that and I get that. I'm not denying that or discounting it. But there were books that were more interesting to me that I ended up targeting. And let me go to kind of the final wrap up clip here. And then I will actually show you the books that I picked up from the show. And again, kind of where I got them, how I got them. And there's one more story about how I went back and and got a book maybe I wasn't expecting to get, but was super happy with. So here's the final wrap up from the show. And then I will show you the books that I bought.
All right, just wrapped up at the convention, and I've got the books right here. They're delicately sitting in the passenger seat, but I'll go through the books in more detail once I get home. But if you recognize some of the books, here's just a little corner box preview of some of these gems, and I will explain how I negotiated on these and why I got them. But I'm super happy, very, very happy. There were some books that I was targeting, some books that I was not expecting to come home with, books that I've been looking for quite some time. So yeah, I will show you more once I get home and we'll look at the grades. But very cool show, and I'm definitely happy I checked it out. So let me head home and we'll check out the books.
All right, I just felt compelled to show you that. I just wanted to let you see that these were books that I had actually acquired from the show, not just books I had randomly pulled out of my personal collection. So those books sat delicately and gently in the front seat of my car as I drove home. I was worried about them sliding around or, having a hard stop where they all slide over everywhere. At these shows, there's not like a concept of like a shopping bag or anything. So there was one book that I will leave towards the end where I brought the books out that I bought from that one dealer and I put them in the trunk of my car. And then I went back in and spent an additional 45 minutes at the show. Like I was done and I said, let me go back in and just check one last time on something. So let me show you some of the books I got. And this is in, I think, the order of, I don't want to say least interesting. They're all interesting to me, but just kind of ramp up and show you here. Now, the first, I guess, group of books that I will show you, this dealer had a dollar bin. And I was kind of like looking down at the bin, but also just kind of flipping through the bin and looking up at the wall at the same time, just sort of scoping things out and just kind of not really paying attention. And then I stopped and noticed that he had a stack of Avengers in his dollar bin. So this is Avengers 265. Avengers 270, 271, and 272. Now, I love this run of Avengers, and I may or may not even have these already, but I figured for $1 I would grab them. Now, the other thing I will tell you, I've graded all of these books already. So when I got home and started sorting these last night, I wanted to very quickly go through and grade. And my thought process too was dollar bin books that are in the bag and board. I'm not going to take them out and sit there in front of the dealer and assess whether or not they're dollar books. So from the dollar books, it was interesting because I wanted to show you what the grades turned out. So this one I gave a 7.5 with the ability to clean and press. This one I gave a 6.0, fine. Here is a 7.5 on this one. Lots of spine damage on that orange cover. And then same with this, 7.5 with the ability to press. So, you know, as you would kind of expect from dollar bin books, you know, beat up, but I like that run of Avengers a lot. But also, I was thinking at the time, I could get some pretty cool books and they would be great to practice in the press because that's right around the era of books that I'm buying, in particular, like from Atomic Avenue, that are in similar shape. And they're great books to practice in the press. Now, next to the dollar bin books, these books were not sorted. So a lot of the dealers have everything alphabetized. And I was just kind of sifting through the bins. And this is a book that I have wanted for quite a while. And it is Spectacular Spider-Man number 90. Now, this is a gorgeous Black Cat Felicia Hardy cover. Oh, that glare again. I apologize. There we go. Is that better? I'm trying. So this is a gorgeous Felicia Hardy Black Cat cover. I was starting to scope out Amazing Spider-Man 194, but that book was not only extremely, I don't want to say overpriced, but the price was high on that book and the conditions were low. So this was the next best thing, and it was not a dollar bin book, but it was certainly an affordable copy. However, when I got home and graded it, I gave it a 5.0. I did mark it HP, and what I mean by that is I'm telling myself that if I did want to press it, it probably should go through a humidity treatment, probably the humidity tank. The back cover is just a mess. It's an absolute mess. But the fair market value on this book is about $50. Just again, random. If I took photos of this book as is, could I get $50 for it? No. But I could probably at least get my money back on it. So that was a nice book to add. And as I'm going through the bins, I found this copy of Amazing Spider-Man. This is ASM 174. And a couple things jump out at me here. We've got the Punisher on the cover. But also, I inspected it there. Again, I'm not taking these out of the bags and boards. That's a huge no-no, and I'll get to that story in a second. But I never, ever do that myself. I noticed other buyers pulling books out of bins and opening them in front of the dealer, and I was losing my mind. I literally was about to, like, yell at somebody. I'm like, hey, he's right there. Just ask him. And the dealer, like, comes over and starts, like, staring and doesn't know what to say. He's trying to be polite because if the guy's going to buy this $100, $200 book, you don't want to upset the potential buyer, you know, and walk away with no sale. But on the other hand, it's a huge no-no. You never, ever, ever go to these shows and start opening their stuff to inspect. You have a right as a buyer to ask, to see the book and so on, but you never take matters into your own hands. So a lot of these books that were just in his bins, now I've rebagged and boarded all of these because they had like a price tag and sticker and the bag's just ruined at that point. So I've gone through and I've put this in my own bag and board. And when I am doing that and I'm rebagging, I just take those couple of minutes to go ahead and grade each book. This one I love because I gave it a 9.6 with the ability to press. And I do feel strongly that if I could properly press this with a little bit of a tack iron treatment, just to get a couple of those non-breaking spine ticks out, this could be a 9.8. So this was what ended up probably being my highest condition copy that I walked away from. I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting to walk away with basically a 9.8 out of the bin, or the potential for a 9.8. Another one that I looked at, again, this is kind of what got me going, where I was like, okay, I'm gonna at least grab these. This is X-Men 211. I believe this is the first appearance of the Marauders. This is the direct edition. I think I've got a couple of newsstand that are pretty beat up. Love this book. Love this John Romita Jr. Wolverine. It's awesome. I will say that this one did need a clean and press, and I gave it a 9.2. So not a super high grade, but definitely a high grade. I believe that I can probably buff it to a 9.4 or 9.6. Again, a lot of the cleaning on the back, it's just dirt, so not too bad there. And then another book that I continue to pick up, it was a little bit of like a consolation prize. I didn't get the first Psylocke. I love Psylocke as a character. I hope that they kind of redo her in the MCU. This is X-Men 256. So here she is. Trying to get that glare off. Sorry. Here she is with the Mandarin front and center on this cover. So I grab a lot of these. All the iterations of Psylocke, are they going to combine into one? Are they going to be like a split personality thing? There's a lot of different options that Marvel and Disney could do with this character. But this one, again, looked to be, when I saw this there at the show in the bag and board, the spine looked to be pristine. I did end up giving this one another 9.6 with a pressing indicator. I did find one spine tick up in the corner box, and then some random couple of just spine stressing on the back. So very minimal, but again, I'd love to work on this book and adjust it and move it up to a 9.8. This one, there's plenty of this book, no doubt, and I have 2 copies, so I've added a third copy, and they're all in sort of the 9.4, 9.6 range. This is X-Men 282, First Bishop, and again, I looked at it and looked almost pristine, and you can kind of see the issue right here on the camera, right there. And when I rebagged and boarded this, it looked like somebody just went like right into the side of the book, just added some impact. I believe that with a press, that just flattens right out. I could be wrong, but that's the only problem with this book. So I gave this one a 9.6 with the ability to press out that defect right there that you saw. It's just that little slight indent and mashing that, again, I think could be just kind of smoothed out. So I would add a little bit of spot humidity on that, throw it in the press, and see what happens. Now, I told you about New Mutants Annual 2, Avengers, X-Men 130 that I almost said I threw back. I didn't throw them back at the dealer. I gently handed the books back to the dealer, and he put them back on his wall. But there were 2 wall books that I told him I was going to get. The first one is Next Wave Agents of Hate. That's Hate. Some places just have this as Next Wave, and this is Next Wave #1. That glare is really messing with me. So I'm onto this book, and I've been looking at it for about 2 years. I've never seen it. Now you can go onto eBay and pay a particular price for it, so I've seen it there, and I guess if I wanted it, I could have grabbed it there. But I've never seen this book. I've heard about it. Now I have a copy, and this is very significant because we've got Elsa, we've got Monica Rambeau. Kind of a weird story, but it is written by Warren Ellis, which is always, to me, one of the reasons I haven't gone all in on this book. But the fact that this was just sitting up on the wall, I'd never seen it in person. And when I looked at it, I'm like, this looks pretty good. Now, I gave this book a 9.6. I didn't think it really had any way to fix some of the issues that I saw with the book. I believe it had to do with some Oh, now I remember. On the back of this book, it was not spine issues. On the back near the spine, though, it is almost like a scrape, and it's color breaking. And I'm like, that CGC will ding you for that stuff all day. So whenever there's a color break like that, I don't even mess with it. I don't even waste my time trying to press it. Okay, so the last book that I got from this dealer, this is a book that I have been on the hunt for a while, but also I hesitated and was scared to pull the trigger back when it was really off people's radar. And I'm definitely paying fair market value for this. But what drew me to it was the fact that I had the book in my hand, and that's kind of one of my takeaways is was I more likely to spend the money because I was holding the book and I wanted the book, whereas online you just kind of see a picture and you're just like you don't have any attachment, but when you're there in person you're kind of holding on to these books and you're asking to see them off the wall. I do start to feel a little attached. Either way, I'm happy to finally have my own copy of Moon Knight #1. So again, I didn't get this out of a dollar bin. I paid fair market value for it. Now, the only catch, I did not ask him to take this out of the bag and board. So lesson learned here. I have no regrets about having this book, but I feel like I paid fair market value for a 9.0. And again, you have to kind of set your budget and whatever you're comfortable with spending. And for me, the 9.0 right now, because I had the opportunity to get a 9.6 back in the day, I passed. I was watching this book, I didn't get it. So there's a little bit of regret and FOMO in there for me built into this book. I have, I think, every issue of this 1980s series except for issue 3, which again, there's Midnight Man, and that one's taking off, so I'm going to wait and get that later. But I was missing issue 1 and issue 3. I now have issue 1. I'm extremely happy. When I did take it out to grade, I gave it an 8. I did indicate that it could be cleaned up and pressed. Honestly, I think if it did, it would probably jump back to the 9. So, did I end up overpaying for it? Yes. In the long run, would it kind of even out? Possibly. Am I happy that I have it 100%? So I'm super stoked to have this. I understand about paying on the peak. I understand all of that. I understand trying to find books when people aren't looking. I'm all into that all day long. But there were quite a few copies of this throughout the convention, and they all started for a lot more than this particular dealer had this copy for. Now, again, in my mind, I'm thinking when I looked at this, and I looked at this like 3 times. The poor guy. I feel bad. I said, "I'm sorry. Can I look at it one more time?" And I was counting the spine ticks and other things, and it's a strong, colorful copy, no doubt. I mean, it looks great, but in my mind, I was thinking 9.0. And then when I was sort of like going around and looking at the books, looking at the other copies of Moon Knight on the floor, I thought that those were fine, very fine copies. And again, it was maybe 10, 20% more than what this particular dealer had it for sale. So I kind of was like, this is a no-brainer for me to grab this in the 9.0 at that particular price. And then I can finally, once and for all, get rid of this FOMO that I've been carrying around, or regret of not buying that book at the price that I did to get it at a 9.6. And again, those days are gone, and I get that, but this was my way to kind of redeem myself and go ahead and acquire it. Now, the very last book, I'll try and make this story brief, but I took those books that I just showed you out to the car, and I put them in the trunk, and I thought, well, I'll only be gone 5 or 10 minutes. They're not all going to melt. It was a beautiful day. It wasn't that hot. So I'm going to leave them in the trunk, and then I will go back in, and I understand how much money I came with, how much money I'm left with. And I did feel a little bit like I was in Vegas, where I'd like, okay, I had just basically broke even at the table, so I still got some money left over. Why don't I just go in and play a little bit more? so, so the insane part of me just says, I'll just go in for another 5 minutes. I'll do one more lap. But at this point, believe me, I've done like 12 to 15 laps around this thing. I know all the books that I'm targeting. I know the prices. I was looking at Savage She-Hulk, and there was different slabs of that, and the price was crazy. And I remember all of that going in. But there was one other book that I saw. Uh, I think I saw it twice, and it was a lower grade copy, and the price was, yeah, I saw I would say like a 7 or a 7.5, and then someone else had a 3.0. And I'm going through and I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to just walk out of there and just grab the 3.0. The 3.0 was still not pricey, but it was still more money than I would expect from a 3.0. So what I did is I knew one other dealer had one that I thought was a little undergraded, but was a fair grade. And I knew what the price was. And I knew exactly where it was. I knew which bin. I knew how many books in the bin. I knew where that book was. So before I went back to that dealer, I double checked with the other one that had it for at like the 775. And I said, could I see the book? I looked at it. I said, would you mind taking it out of the bag and board? And again, if they say no, I walk away. But all of these dealers were very pleasant, very nice people. So I said, could you take it out of the bag and board? Could I look at it? He shows it to me, and I'm like, it would have been a great place to start if I wanted to try and upgrade the book, but I said to myself, no, it's mid grade. I don't want it. I walk back to the other table. I'm looking at the book, and I want to do the same thing. I want to see if he'll take it out of the bag and board and let me examine the book. Because looking at it in the bag and board, to me, it looks like 9496. So I think I'm getting a bargain here. So long story long, I I never want to talk to a dealer where it could potentially upset them, or I might be butting in line. I'm hearing dealers talk about what they're ordering from lunch for lunch, and this place is too far, and they're getting upset. And I'm thinking, you want to hit a dealer when he's in a good mood, because that's when they'll negotiate. So I stood at the table and I watched another person come in and complete a transaction where they were trading cash, a personal check, and books, again, to each their own, uh, in order to acquire another book from this dealer. So this dealer, and I'm not going to get into the particulars of the deal, but all of that story for another time. But that's fascinating to me, is to hear people negotiate. Crazy. Like, it got down. Well, here I am telling you the story. It got down to the person who was writing the check, and he was saying, "Can I post date it a couple weeks?" Crazy, all of it. Again, I set a budget. I get cash. I walk in with cash, and I'm not going to spend any more. I told you the story with the X-Men 130. As soon as I thought to myself, well, I could leave and get more cash and come back, I stopped. It's a bad sign. So anyway, to wrap up that part, they complete the transaction. So I'm standing there at the table, and I've got this book in my hand, and I'm thinking, okay, he's in a pretty good mood. He just made a deal, so he might be willing to take a few dollars off this if I ask nicely and I seem generally interested. So I walk up, and I think you know how this story is going to end, so I'll go ahead and show you the book. So I walk up and I ask to see Star Wars #2. This is the first appearance of Obi-Wan, right there on the cover. So I asked the nice dealer, I'm like, hey, you've got this in a 9.0. Do you mind taking it out of the bag and board so I can see it? So he takes it out. I then take the book very carefully, and I start to look at it, and I turn the book over, and I notice right at the top there's a little bit of a flap, like not necessarily a spine break or a tear, but it's just a little bit, almost like, again, if you're putting a comic in the bag and board and you accidentally push too hard, something like that, but a little bit wider, maybe the width of like 2 fingers. So anyway, I told him, I said, I think your 9.0 assessment is fair, but would you be willing to come down essentially like 25%? And he kind of sat there and was like, well, I think it's a pretty strong copy. And I didn't want to think, like, in my head, this was a 9.4, But then when I actually looked at the book and started to actually really assess it and be fair and honest, I'm like, it's actually a 9. I think, and he graded it a 9. So that was again something I learned, that his grades on the books I think are more or less not fully accurate. Obviously, depends book to book, but I think it was fair. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. So I took 25% off, and I said, would you accept this amount? And he said, no, I think it's a strong copy. Now, again, as we're negotiating too, in my mind, I'm thinking pressable defects. No tears, not a lot of color breaks in here. Very similar to a copy I have of Star Wars 1 that I want to send in for pressing and grading. And I'm like, those two would really make a strong pair for like a high grade. So he sat there and thought about it for a second and just said, I can't do it. I really think it's a strong copy. How about you meet me in the middle? And so he countered, and in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I would have paid what he had the book for sale at. So he had a certain price, certain grade, and I was prepared to walk in and pay that price. So I offered 25% less. He met me halfway, so 12.5% off of the price, and I got it. When I got home, I looked at it a little bit more closely just to ensure, kind of like with the Moon Knight book, did I miss anything? Was I too aggressive with the grading? And I looked at it, and sure enough, I landed at a final assessment of a 9.0, and with the ability to have it pressed. It doesn't need a cleaning, in my opinion. Everything is super strong. The colors, the pages inside, it's going to get white pages if it were sent to CGC. But as a Star Wars fan, as a collector of these comics, I hate to say I had to have it, but it was a book that I saw a lot of dealers have in various grades, different prices, kind of all over the place. And this was super fair. And again, I think that being able to see the book in person and assess either is the grade accurate and is the condition of the book, would it allow for improvements if need be? And I would have had a hard time buying this online at that price. Honestly, I don't know if I would have forked over the money that I did just randomly, blindly, based on an eBay scan or an unpictured description of the book. So all in all, I was happy to be there in person, and was definitely happy to see the book and hold it up and go, okay, I think that's pretty strong. I think it's going to work. And like I said in one of the clips, I'm very, very satisfied. It was a wonderful experience. Most, if not everyone there was pleasant, was nice, willing to negotiate as long as you had cash. And I have a lot more stories that I could share about it, but I think that this video is long enough. So yeah, I definitely think about myself as this person that likes to buy online and collect online and things like that. But there's definitely something about being at a show like that with dealers and collectors and people hunting and digging through bins and stuff. And it's certainly exciting and fun. And I hope to do it again. This show, I think, runs a couple times a year. And it's definitely inspired me to look and see if there's some other shows out there that I'd want to attend and check out. So I hope you enjoyed this little recap documentary of my day at the San Fernando Valley Comic Book Convention. Thanks for watching, happy collecting, and see you next time.